What's up, everybody? Welcome back into another episode of 1-0. I know we had one just 2 days ago, but there's already been some major news regarding LSU, even some NFL stuff, and also even some NFL offseason stuff, as well as the national championship maybe being delayed. So we're going to talk about all of those things. We'll start off right now talking about LSU. So huge news for the Tigers. They hired Jake Peetz and DJ Mangus as their offensive coordinator and passing game coordinator. And LSU fans are going to be happy to hear this. Jake Peetz, 37 years old. DJ Mangus, who is on the 2019 staff as an analyst, 32 years old. He's the passing game coordinator. Peetz is the offensive coordinator. Coach O called up Joe Brady. He said, "Joe, who you gonna give me? Who's the best guys that you can get as the offensive coordinators?" And it was these two guys that Joe Brady gave him. So if you're an LSU fan, you've got to be happy about this because these are Joe Brady's handpicked guys. You're not sure that they're going to work out. It's not guaranteed, but they're young, innovative offensive minds handpicked by the man who really made that 2019 offense go. So that's huge news for the LSU Tigers going forward. We'll have to see really what the offense looks like. Obviously next fall, maybe if we get a spring game this year, we'll get to get a little bit of a glimpse at it, but we won't know how those hires will work out until later in this year. We're only in January, so we got to wait till August to really see. But the good news is these were the guys that were number one on the LSU Tigers list. They're handpicked by Joe Brady, and the LSU Tigers got them the day after they interviewed yesterday, hired on Wednesday. You're hearing this on Thursday, and that is when the big fish, though, for LSU fans really comes. If you're an LSU fan, you know you watched this game. You saw even in the Ole Miss game, there were still dudes wide open down the field, nobody within 10 yards of them, and just a defensive incompetency. That's why Bo Pelini was fired. Marcus Freeman will be interviewing today. He is a guy that's going to get offers as a head coach. So this is something that the Tigers are really going to have to hone in on. Coach O and whoever is in this interview are going to have to hone in hard as they can. Because if you don't get Marcus Freeman, the only other name that's really been out there that's been interviewed, and I've said this on other episodes and I'll say it again, is like Derek Mason. I don't think, if you're an LSU fan, just like me, you don't want Vanderbilt's head coach as the defensive coordinator. I mean, what? Vanderbilt went 0-10. I know it's Vanderbilt, and I know it's not all his fault, and I know that he's been a defensive coordinator in the past, and it's a lot easier to be a coordinator than a head coach. But if you're LSU and you saw what happened with the defense last year, I don't think that that's going to cut it. You want somebody like Marcus Freeman, who, like I said in last episode, was able to slow down a high-powered Georgia offense with a group of 5 roster. That is huge. He's 34 years old. He's somebody who can relate to the players. He's somebody who is a young, innovative mind, understands the modern spread offense, and understands how to put a modern defense in front of that spread to slow it down. But he could get a head coaching job somewhere else, and maybe that's where he wants to go. They're going to have to show him the big bucks. I said this 2 days ago. We'll really have to wait and see what happens in the next coming days. You'll see an episode of me talking about that later. But just wanted to show that off right at the top of this thing. And there is some more news. So last episode, we talked about how Arik Gilbert it wasn't necessarily in the transfer portal, even though he'd announced it. He is officially in the transfer portal. So last episode I mentioned it's probably some false hope, and it was. It did turn out being that. So Arik Gilbert officially gone from LSU, will probably be a Georgia Bulldog. We'll have to see for sure. It wouldn't surprise me if he ends up being a member of the Crimson Tide, to be completely honest with you, because that's just how it would feel. You know, I got this hat on, this Louisiana hat, and honestly, that would just be so fitting to be completely real with you if he ends up going to Alabama. We'll have to see, though. So some bad news for LSU, but expected bad news. Some good news for LSU, which maybe it seemed expected that they were going to be able to get these two guys with Joe Brady recommending them to Coach O and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, you know, nothing's guaranteed. So it was super huge to get DJ Mangus and Jake Peetz. Also, in the world of college football, there's some other big news. It seems that the national championship may also be delayed, it seems like. So we're not sure yet. There's been no official announcement, but the date that it could be moved to is January 18th if COVID issues persist for Ohio State. We'll have to see. Once again, don't know. Hopefully it's played on time. It seems like that's what both teams want to do. From what I've read, it looks like that the Big Ten office is the one that's like, hey, we might want to push this back. Ohio State wants to play, Alabama wants to play, and the SEC's office wants to play on January 11th, the originally scheduled date. We'll have to see. The good news is, regardless, college football fans, even if it's a little bit later, we're going to safely play a national championship. Everybody's going to be healthy. Everybody, including Jalen Waddle, which will be huge because if Alabama has that offense that they usually do at full power with Jalen Waddle, the Heisman Trophy winner, Devontae Smith, good on him. That was the right choice. God bless that they picked him. I made a video about it on Strive's YouTube page. You can go check that out. Who am I forgetting? John Mechie III. There's so many other guys. You're going to have Najee Harris in there, of course, as well. Mac Jones. The whole firepower for Steve Sarkisian in his final game. Alabama will have it against Ohio State, which looked so dominant against Clemson. Once again, we'll have to wait and see what happens and if it'll be delayed. But regardless, it seems like Jalen Waddle's coming back. And if it does get delayed even more, it seems like even more of a guarantee that he'll come back. But regardless, once again, national championship is going to be played, and it will be played safely. So that's the most important thing, and we're getting it as college football fans. So God bless. Anyways, other college football news. There's been a lot of rumors about Dan Mullen. He might be potentially leaving Florida for the NFL, and apparently this has been a thing for a couple of seasons. And it's very interesting because off the rip, you would think, oh, this dude just brought Florida to an SEC championship and hung in with Alabama. Yeah, they had some bumps and hiccups in the road, but they have a Heisman candidate quarterback. It is the best Florida year in a while. But there are some problems with Dan Mullen, and we've talked about that on this show before. And a lot of other fans across college football of opposing teams like a Georgia, even a Florida State. I'm an LSU fan. I don't like Florida. I would be so happy if Dan Mullen left. I take that back. I wouldn't be happy if he left. I would be so happy if he stayed because I know he has issues and he hasn't been able to prove himself in the big games. He's just denied everything, hasn't taken accountability for losses in press conferences. We saw it against LSU when he said Marco Wilson's shoe toss of 20 yards wasn't a personal foul and it was a football move, and then 2 days later he doubled down on it. We saw him once again just make excuses after getting completely dominated by Oklahoma and Kyle Trask throwing 3 interceptions in the first quarter against the secondary that last year gave up the most yards in college football playoff history in a one half. This dude is just the king of excuses. We've seen it every single year. He doesn't take accountability. He'd be better off as an offensive coordinator in the NFL, which is why I could see how he would leave. But that Florida job is so coveted. There's so much talent there. If the right person gets in there, that can be a program that competes for a national championship regularly. We've seen it with Urban Meyer. We've seen it with Steve Spurrier. And it can happen again. History repeats itself if Dan Mullen ends up leaving to an NFL team. So, once again, not sure what's going to happen with that. We'll have to keep waiting and seeing. But as of right now, it looks like Dan Mullen might be headed to the NFL, and the Florida job might be open. We just saw Steve Sarkisian go to Texas. That's a huge get and a huge job. An even bigger opening might be in the works. But we'll have to see. NFL news. Jags, Texans, Jets. All gone, all cleaning house. A great decision for all of these organizations, but it's going to be very interesting to see who ends up being the head coach in these places because all of these teams have a young quarterback. The Jags don't have their young quarterback yet, but they have the number 1 pick. So Trevor Lawrence will be a Jacksonville Jaguar. And even if he isn't, you're going to get somebody like Justin Fields or Zach Wilson. But all things considered, we know it's going to be Trevor Lawrence unless something crazy happens. Regardless, even if they don't get Trevor Lawrence, still one of the more young, talented quarterbacks in the NFL. Texans have Deshaun Watson. Chargers have potentially the rookie of the year in Justin Herbert, who broke the rookie TD record. Joe Brady was interviewed by the Texans and the Chargers. I made a video a couple months ago talking about how the Jags should hire Joe Brady if they get Trevor Lawrence and how they could rebuild their franchise with it. But now it seems that Deshaun Watson or even Justin Herbert may have that system if he ends up becoming the head coach of one of those teams. I think that's a great decision by both of those teams. I feel bad for Matt Rule because he made a fire hire, if you will, with Joe Brady in Carolina, and they'll probably look to get another QB in this upcoming draft that is so QB heavy. But doesn't look like he'll be staying there. He might be going to one of those teams. Also, rumors that Urban Meyer might go to the NFL level, specifically with the Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence. So these are three teams. The reason I mention these quarterbacks is because they have so much potential. These are some of the best young stars up and coming with Herbert, Watson, and Lawrence. So if you get them a good coach and you get them a good infrastructure, you're going to see these teams take it to the next level. We saw the Texans in the playoffs last year, and then Bill O'Brien destroyed the franchise over the offseason. So once again, the Texans can be a playoff team if they have the right infrastructure. They have the talent, they have the quarterback. The AFC South isn't that strong. Well, there is the Titans and there is the Colts, but still, the Texans have a shot to beat some of those teams, especially if Phillips Rivers is gone after next year. So, once again, they still have Frank Reich and Mike Vrabel, who are two very good coaches, but in the world of the NFL now, where 7 teams can get in, it only makes the shot for the Texans with a quarterback like Deshaun Watson, who really is probably the best quarterback in the division. They should have a shot to make the playoffs every year with him with a competent leadership and coach. Let's look at the Jaguars. Justin Herbert, obviously the AFC South, or I guess it's the AFC West, is going to be dominated by the Chiefs for a long time to come. There's also the Las Vegas Raiders in there, but we saw that this this Chargers team has a bunch of potential, especially with Justin Herbert. I went into this year not really thinking Justin Herbert was going to be legit. I thought he was like, he couldn't win at Oregon. He's not going to win in the NFL. I was wrong. Looks like he's doing a great job in adjusting to the NFL game even better than he did the college game. So if they can get a Joe Brady, if they can get a competent offensive coordinator, that's another team that could be dangerous to the Chiefs. Maybe not necessarily be competitive with the Chiefs is kind of what I'm saying whenever I say dangerous, but a team that could make the playoffs in the future with a star quarterback like Justin Herbert, who will only get better if he gets a guy like Joe Brady at the helm, who is just an offensive genius in today's football world. Looking at the Jaguars, once again, that's somebody who I really think I think that the Jaguars really should have went after Joe Brady, but they did not. Guess they're looking at Urban Meyer. But I mean, hey, it's Urban Meyer. We'll have to see. I don't really know what's going to happen with that Jags job, but once again, the theme with all of these teams, when you look at the Jaguars, is if you get yourself a Trevor Lawrence and you get yourself a competent OC or just a competent coach, right? You're going to be fine. You're going to be on the right track. Eventually, Ryan Tannehill is going to decline. And yes, they have Derrick Henry, but eventually he's going to decline. Running backs' lifespans in the NFLs aren't that long. There is that AFC South. I know that it seems like the Colts and the Titans are a mainstay. It seems like the Titans will be a mainstay and the Colts will be a question mark, but seem like still even a 7-9 team with Jacoby Brissett last year. If I'm wrong, correct me, but it's wide open. It's not as wide open as it seems, or as it seems at the moment, but in the future, if you have a Trevor Lawrence on your roster, you should be able to beat everybody in that division other than maybe his Clemson counterpart, who didn't win a Heisman Trophy but won a national championship in Deshaun Watson. That's going to be very interesting if those two Clemson guys just go at each other in that division for years to come. But once again, 17 playoff. So, extra spot, 3 teams from one division can get in. We saw that this year with the Ravens, the Browns, and the Steelers. But that will wrap up today's episode of 1-0. I know this was a little bit of a shorter episode. Just wanted to get through some quick topics, talk about it. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We're here at the Strive Network Studios in Knollwood, Texas. Catch you guys later.